this community learning is being recorded for all of you to have later when we provide after today, as well as some housekeeping items that I wanted to go over. We will discuss on how to ask questions and then also just some features today in the community learning that we'll be using to get people engaged, to share with one another, and to be supportive for one another. And those features include polling questions and open-ended questions that we'll be asking. Obviously, using the chat box as an option as well, and a Q&A session at the end also. Some other housekeeping items that I want to kind of discuss with are also important is if you are dialed in using your phone, please mute your speaker that you can is located at the top of the W room. So this way it reduces any echoing, and that also goes the same for if you have the mic on in the W room and you called in, please mute that as well. This really helps with any echoing and just makes the community learning more smoother. And how to ask questions. Sorry. On how to ask questions, we have a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen in the W room where you can ask questions. You can type anything you need. We will respond to them as fast as we can. So don't hesitate. You could ask any time. We will make sure to address anything that you want us to address. And so a little bit of background on our community learning series. It is a model that we have that is based off of peer sharing. And so we have peers, Title V UIOs and non-UIOs share with one another on best practices and ways that they can increase their capacity to write better grants and to manage grants successfully. So this model provides a virtual classroom and really to help all of us out in any challenges that we might be facing. And so with that being said, I just wanted to share a little bit about MOCHA. MOCHA is a national membership nonprofit organization divided to support in the development, quality, and accessibility to culturally competent healthcare services for American Indian and Alaska Natives living in urban settings. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you today's presenter, our Deputy Director, Jamie Ishkama Azami. Jamie is a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and has extensive experience serving Indian country at the regional and national level. Before joining MOCHA, Jamie had the honor of working at the California Rural Indian Health Board and the National Indian Health Board, where she provided training and technical assistance support to tribal public health infrastructure development. She also graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, where she got her master's in public health and social work. And she is a scholar with the Catherine Burden Center of American Indian Studies. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand over the mic to Jamie.
Thank you so much, Sabu, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today for our community of learning. As we mentioned, I'm Jamie Ishkomer-Azami. I'm the Deputy Director of the National Council of Urban Indian Health, and I'm so happy to be here with folks today. Just a couple of quick things to echo what Sabu said is please feel free to use the chat box, Q&A features, raise your hand. I'm hoping that this can be an opportunity for folks to learn from one another, share their experiences, as well as what products, resources, best practices, and tips that you all have. And so encourage folks to unmute their lines if they would like. You can raise your hand if you want, use the Q&A box. And also, I'm hoping to learn some information from you all too. So I just really encourage folks to do that. That said, I know that we've slated 2 hours for this webinar presentation, and that is with the intent to have some discussions and some sharing. And so if there's less discussion and engagement, just know that this may end early, and folks can get some time back in their day if you'd like. And again, it can be as robust of discussion as you all would like. So I encourage you all to do that, please. Again, this is an introduction to managing grants and setting yourself up for success. Topics that I'm going to cover today are the importance of preparation, planning, implementation, and evaluation for grant writing, dividing roles and responsibilities, accountability to each other and your funders, and then go over some project management tools and resources. A quick disclaimer that this presentation is not meant to provide information really to support the development of a grant application. Rather, it will focus more on managing a grant after you have received it. That said, there will be some tips to consider for you all as you are writing the grant application, which I'll go into as well. But just as that disclaimer that we're not going to go so much into the application writing the application itself, but if folks have questions about that, I'm more than happy to try to answer them. And then this presentation is also developed with the support of SMART objectives being in mind. And so for folks that don't know what SMART objectives are, they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And so that's kind of an assumption that I didn't want to come in with the assumption that folks know what SMART objectives are, but this is, again, with objectives and activities being written in that format. So who am I? Who's Jamie Ishkomer-Azami, and why is she presenting this information? So Sabu gave a really, really great bio of me. Thank you so much, Sabu. In addition to that, I just want to share a little bit more about myself. So I was, as mentioned, I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, but was born and raised in Illinois. On the slide here, you can see a photo of my family members to the left. I recently got married in November. If folks are familiar with the National Indian Health Board staff, Shervin Azami, the Director of Congressional Relations, you may recognize him in that photo. And we do have a dog, Vicky, who's our sweetheart too. Also, as Sabu had mentioned, I have vast experience in a variety of regions and areas, and so after graduate school where I got my MPH and my MSW, I went to Sacramento where I was a research associate at the California Tribal Epidemiology Center at the California Rural Indian Health Board, and have been writing grants since joining that organization. And so experience there, as well as with the National Indian Health Board, more in managing grants, the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, as well as the National Council of Urban Indian Health, of course. And I share this just with you all also get an understanding of more of my background and experiences and where I'm coming at from this information that I'll present to you all today. So the first question that I have for you all, and to really kind of hopefully get some thoughts going and be able to respond to some of your input, what do you all dread most about project management? Please feel free to use the polling feature on the slide right now. You on budgets, yes, definitely. People not being as excited as I am about starting a new project. Folks who are just there for the job, all right, so getting folks excited and energized. Reporting, we discussed a little bit about that. Progress reports and tracking appropriate expense and budgeting. We won't get too much into expenses and budgeting specifically, but can try to maybe have some of those conversations as a group as well. It's not a big part of this presentation, but I think we have a lot of folks on the line that can maybe share some of their best practices and tips as well. IRB timelines. Won't get into specifics for IRB timelines, but definitely some helpful information to help you plan for those. Keeping track of deliverables when there are multiple moving timelines. Yes, that's a big one, and we'll definitely get into that one today. And that is someone's hold music that we're hearing, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, Jimmy. Just wanted to let people know, if you are on the phone right now, can you please mute your phone line by pressing star 6? This way, when you mute your phone lines, background music and any noise might not won't interfere with the community learning. So for those who did not please press star 6. Unmute your line.
Sorry, folks. We'll try to get. Is there a way to mute that person's line?
Let me do it.
All right, I think we got the whole music gone. Apologies, folks. So just a quick reminder, if you do need to put us on hold, if you get another call, please press star 6 so we don't hear that whole music beforehand. Okay, so we got some great responses into that first poll. Thanks, folks, for participating. Again, some of those we'll definitely get into. Others are not so much the topic of this presentation, but I think we have plenty of time to definitely get into them and encourage folks to ask questions of one another and even ask specific questions that they might have in the Q&A box, so we can raise those. And again, if I don't have the answer, don't know the answer off the top of my head, maybe someone on the line does. Okay, so these are a list of project management. The top 10 project management pitfalls came from the website on the bottom here that you can see. And so I just wanted to quickly go over what some of these pitfalls are, and I think you'll see a lot of the presentation itself is actually built around these pitfalls and how to overcome them. And so the first one being, of course, poor communication. I think it probably goes without saying that poor communication can absolutely be a pitfall for anybody, or for anything, any project, anything that you're working on. So poor communication is definitely one that can lead to a lot of issues. And so we'll get into some ways around improving communication, lack of trust and delegation. So if folks aren't trusting of their staff, then that can sometimes be a bottleneck potentially, or somebody wanting to try to do it all. So talk a little bit about how to delegate projects. Unclear roles and responsibilities, as well as deliverables. So similar to the lack of trust and delegation. You know, if you don't have trust in your work plan and who is in confidence in who's responsible for that, that can derail project plans really, really quickly. Poorly created project plan. I think that one goes without saying that if you don't have a good project plan from the start, then unfortunately you're kind of set yourself up for that to happen and setting yourself up for and not easy grant cycle. Lack of breaking down projects into smaller tasks is a big one. I think we'll definitely get into that one. I think oftentimes folks feel like they're drinking from a fire hose when they see a work plan in front of them. You don't really know how to begin, and so we'll get into that a little bit. Weak resource management. Weak resource management being the next one. Just what resources you have, so that kind of gets into a little bit of the budget, and so budget considerations definitely important. Attention to people management. So that kind of gets into the role of responsibilities and people that are part of the team, and maybe that person that wrote somebody or their team not being as excited about projects as they are. That might some people management might be able to help in managing expectations. Inappropriate risk management. I think that this one is one that, even after 5+ years of grant writing, I still oftentimes forget about including in my application, and it's not until I'm in the grant itself and getting delayed and having issues arise that I think that I realized that I forgot to incorporate risk management into my timeline, into my work plan, and allowing for that. Baked or unrealistic deadlines that aren't holding true can definitely, if you have one missed deadline, that can be a domino effect for a lot of others for the project. And then 10 inefficient project management tools, which we'll definitely go over today as this is focused on, project management tips and tools and resources to support that. And before I move on, I just wanted to see if any folks wanted to raise anything, that there are anything specific to one of these major pitfalls that they've experienced directly, would like to raise as maybe an example to share. Feel free to use the chat box or raise your hand or just unmute your line if you'd like to share. All right, maybe here in a little bit we'll get some folks. Okay, now I'm going to move into the importance of preparation, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So of course, I just got done saying my little disclaimer that this presentation is not going to go into the grant writing process and really focus on what to include in your grant application. And now this is my first section, considerations for your grant application, but these do really you have to be thinking about these as you're developing the application and including these activities and items in there, and that again, for the planning, implementation, evaluation purposes as you're thinking about the full cycle of the grant. So the first tip that I want to share with folks is to always have your first activity when you're writing a grant, if you can, especially with federal partners, federally funded grant applications, definitely do this. Activity 1, finalize work plan, deadlines, and budget with the funder. By month 1, by month 2, you can whichever timeline you want to give yourself. I think that is definitely a good tip that I recently learned and have since started using it for all of my grant applications, because that puts in a deliverable to actually finalize the work plan and make sure that everybody is clear on what the deliverables are, what the timelines are, and what the funder will expect. And another activity that I always put in there, and this is typically on the last activity, is ensure ongoing compliance with the funder. And so with that can be, monthly check-in calls, submitting the progress reports on time, as well as annual reports submitted on time. And I know that might seem, a little too simple to include that as a grant deliverable, but it also acts as another reminder for the project team on, when when to start preparing for the progress reports or the annual reports. It gets built into the timeline if you include it as an activity in the grant application itself. So again, these two activities I can't stress enough in your actual grant applications. I would encourage you to always include them. They're really, really low risk, and so shouldn't really impact your budget much. And so if there are major changes, and this actually activity 1 does help get you, thinking about potential changes that need to occur from both sides, the awardee as well as the funder's perspective at the very start of it. So you're not 9 months in, having only a few months left to finish, and there's a major change in the work plan. And this really helps support, you can see in the top right corner, poor communication, a poorly created project plan, or fake and unrealistic deadlines. Help support those. Second item I want to get into is PI. So this is going to be your first resource, if you will, that I'll keep talking about throughout the entirety of my presentation. So for those that don't know what PI stands for, it's Planning, Implementation, and Evaluation. And I think it's pretty standard, especially in public health projects and interventions and programs, to have those 3 components in there. But I want to share it with you in a way to think through this as you can writing the grant application. You're thinking about everything that needs to go into the planning of the activity, the implementation of the activity, and the evaluation of the activity, recognizing that planning takes a lot of time, and oftentimes I think we unfortunately don't take into account all of the time that planning could take. And so with that, also considering the barriers or challenges that you may encounter at each point. Again, if you're thinking about those barriers as you're planning and writing the grant application, you can include those in various components and pre-plan for them in the planning stage, implementation, and potential evaluation stage. And I think that this is a really big one for Indian country, especially as we always, we always tend to have external stakeholder involvement, whether it's our community members, our board members, our, it's our staff. That it's a lot of stakeholder involvement in all that we do. You also want to use that to be mindful of summer and holiday vacation periods. I think it's pretty standard for a lot of folks, especially those within federal agencies, to take off a lot during the month of December around the holidays. And so if you're factoring those into your planning process as you're writing the grant, you can try to avoid having deadlines around that time that you might be reliant on your funders for feedback. That could potentially, put you back, or work group members or other stakeholders, and also be considerate of data sources that you might be using for evaluation or performance indicators. That really gets into the evaluation. If you already have the data, is it readily available? Will you have to request it from somebody? How long would it take to pull, if you're pulling data from multiple data sources, how long will it take to pull that data in that planning phase, as opposed to before the evaluation phase even happens? And so, again, PI for all activities can definitely help in consider the barriers that you may encounter at each one of those points. One thing that is not in here that I also like to consider for all of my activities that didn't go with the PI thing is also the dissemination. Don't forget about disseminating all of your information, that your resources that you developed, because you definitely want to get that information out there. So consider using PI for all activities, against planning, implementation, and evaluation. Can't stress it enough. As well as consider barriers or challenges that you may encounter at each point. And these can really help support a poorly created project plan, lack of breaking down projects into smaller tasks. So again, when you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose, you even just start breaking them down into what do you need to focus on for the planning phase of your project, the implementation phase of the project, and the evaluation phase of the project. This can support resource management. Again, it's really planning ahead and thinking about all the factors and barriers that you may encounter. Inappropriate risk management, fake or unrealistic deadlines, and then inefficient project management tools. All kind of supports all of those. Again, PI being, I think, just one of many project management tools, but it's only one.
Jamie, sorry,
yeah.
but I think that there was some folks that that the slide is stuck on the first one. Like it's back on the slide before. I want to ask everyone, can everyone see on the slide that says PIE, P-I-E in big letters, and it says PIE for all activities?
Yep, Brittany, yes, I can see the pie.
Okay, because someone had said they said they were stuck on the first one, and then I got some email saying that the slide is like insane, so I had to ask that question ahead of time.
Oh, and it looks like Kimberly Fowler recommended folks select the sync button on your screen if it isn't moving forward. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. So I am on timelines. Can folks see timelines? Yes. Okay. All right. So just briefly going back to PIE, does anybody have any questions about PIE? Planning, implementation, evaluation. We'll dig a little bit deeper here in a little bit, but I just want to pause just in case. Okay. Next, moving on to timelines. And again, this is as you're thinking about your grant application, you're thinking about your work plan. So this is pre-submitting the application. Just a helpful tip that will help once you are receiving it and then managing the grant itself. Is to work backwards from most applications have an end date, and so work backwards from that end date or the project in time and go from evaluation and think through how much time you'll need for evaluation of the project and implementation and planning, and that does really, really help ensure that you are building out enough time for each of them. And again, if you focus on each one of those components and having a timeline for them. And again, considering the barriers or challenges that you may encounter at each point, and stakeholder involvement, holiday vacation periods, et cetera, et cetera. And at the bottom right of your screen, you'll see an image of a Gantt chart for folks that are familiar with it. And you can see a little bit of how, having those timelines for things that overlap, especially as we're planning and planning implementation. We might still implementing a project component as we're starting evaluation. And so having that, overlay of the Gantt chart and the timing to see which project or which activity needs to build upon another potentially can be really, really helpful, laying that out that way. Now finally, just putting that all together. So everything that we've chatted or I presented before, having activity 1, finalize the work plan, deadlines and budget with funder by month 1. So remember to develop your timeline by working backwards for this. And so by month 1, we know that we need to have that output being the one finalized and agreed upon work plan. So what does it take to get to that one finalized and agreed upon work plan? It takes planning. We have to think about all the little components that go into even just trying to plan a call with the funder. The more people that you have involved, of course, the harder it is. And so if you have planning space, schedule call 1 with funder, every little piece that needs to go into that, breaking the tasks into smaller pieces. Identify who all needs to be on the call, and if you have email address or contact information for those individuals, to do that by week 1. In the doodle pool to identify availability by week 1. So then that's building upon that previous activity. So we need to have the email addresses and contact information before we can send the doodle pool. So that's, again, we're laying it out on a Gantt chart format. Can really help. Send the calendar invite to all participants once meeting time has been established, and develop the agenda for the call 1. So those are just 4 tasks that go into just trying to schedule the one call. And I think oftentimes folks kind of forget about how much effort and energy and time it can take. And so that's when we run up against missed or faked or unrealistic deadlines, is because we're not considering all of the little components that need to go into, again, just scheduling a call. moving to the implementation of that, that's facilitate the call with the funder to finalize it, and then update the work plan and send the funder by week 4 or end of month 1. Again, take into consideration your potential barriers, unknown contact information, delayed doodle poll responses. Somebody may be out of the office for a week. You get an out-of-office reply that they're not going to return to the office for another week. That already puts you behind your deadline of week 1 or week 2 to get that calendar invite done because you haven't heard back from that individual. Any questions from the group on this? And feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat feature if you do. And then here we have the little pie logo or pie image there as well. All right, since I didn't get into it earlier based on that example, I wanted to share a few quick notes on evaluation and performance measurement. So this is really how you know that you're being successful in your project or accountable to your organization, to your funders, your stakeholders, that your community members, your board members. So just think about the types of evaluation. There's process evaluation or versus outcome evaluation, evaluating the final product. There's different measures to look at. There's indicators and data sources. I'm not going to really get into these deeply, but just I wanted to raise it as a consideration for things to be thinking about as you're developing that application. Because again, we're talking about being accountable to funders. That those performance measures with those indicators, that's how they measure you're being successful in your project. And if folks do have more questions on evaluation and performance measurement, I do know that a previous one of our community of learning webinars goes very deeply into the details of all of that. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you do have questions or want more information on just evaluation and performance measurement. And just a couple quick notes, especially as you're thinking about your measures and your data sources. Be thinking about, is it primary data collection, and build that into your timeline. Because primary data collection, of course, takes a lot longer. If primary data collection, where you have to get into IRB, do you have to go through OMB clearance? Be thinking about all of that as you're writing that grant application and building the appropriate amount of time to be able to do that. Okay, so on to a poll question. Try to get folks to maybe share a little bit about what they use. So best practice that I use in my grant writing to better support planning, implementation, and evaluations of deliverables is, give folks a couple of minutes to share a little bit. Does anybody also always have that activity 1 being finalize the work plan with funders, or include an activity to remain compliant to the funders with monthly check-in calls or progress reports? Folks take into consideration external stakeholder involvement and how that might be a potential risk or barrier. We have somebody that shared they use peer-reviewed materials or resources if it's available, definitely. Best practice, evidence-based materials, yeah. So evidence-based peer review, definitely critical, especially if the application requests that your interventions or programs need to be evidence-based. Realistic timelines, built-in check-in calls, great. just give folks one more minute in case anybody's typing. Setting aside time at the beginning of a project to bring all stakeholders together to discuss the work plan, possible road bumps to avoid. I think that's a great idea. So you do it a little one step further than what I suggested in terms of having the project team and the funders there to discuss the work plan and any road bumps or anything, but you bring in all stakeholders. Great. And so building that into the timeline of all stakeholder involvement, trying to get more folks there. So I imagine you have a little bit more planning time built out for that. All right. And go ahead and move on. Now focus on dividing responsibility. So we've moved beyond the grant application. We've now received the award. Congratulations. But now you got to figure out how you're going to start the project. So another quick question for you all. How satisfied are you with how work is currently divided among your team when you start a new project? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not satisfied at all, and 5 being extremely satisfied, we'll get that polling option or that question moved over here for folks to participate. A lot of 3s, a lot of satisfied folks, but always room for improvement. So I just see 1 extremely satisfied. Want to have a chat with you after this. Kidding. We'd love to hear your best practices and what you all do around dividing work amongst yourselves. If you're somewhat satisfied, it looks like the vast majority of folks are satisfied with how work is currently divided amongst your team. So it's really, really great to hear. Again, as a quality improvement person, I say there's always room for improvement. And so, maybe after this presentation, you'll be able to take some resources back to the office, and maybe this time next year you'd be able to report that you're very satisfied or extremely satisfied with this process. Let's move on and get into roles and responsibilities. And so this is really dividing the work amongst the team members. And this is called MOCHA. And so you'll notice we have a pie, and now we have MOCHA. So MOCHA stands for Manager, Owner, Consulted, Helper, and Approver. This is a really, really great resource from from the Management Center. I have a link on the slide at the bottom. And this is just, again, a way to help you think through the members of your project team and what their roles are. So a manager is the person that assigns responsibility and holds the owner accountable. It makes suggestions, asks the hard questions, reviews progress, serves as a resource, and intervenes when the work is off track. The owner has overall responsibility for the success or failure of the project, ensures that all of the work gets done, whether directly or with helpers, and that others are involved appropriately. So there should really only be 1 owner. So that 1 owner is, again, that they have overall responsibility for it. Consultants who should be asked for input needs or brought into the project. Consulted is oftentimes community members or stakeholders, the executive director maybe, other team members from other project teams that might have some pre-existing information that might be helpful in the planning stages. Helper, this is somebody that assists with or does some of the work. And so this is somebody that's actually on the project team doing the work. And the approver is the person that signs off on decisions before they're final. It's maybe a manager. So it might also be the executive director, an external partner, so a funder potentially, or a board chair. So again, this is MOCHA. MOCHA example. We'll go over here. So manager assigns responsibility and holds the owner accountable. That might be the department director of the team. the owner, who has overall responsibility for the project, whether it's successful or a failure, is maybe the project manager of that same department. Consultant, who should be asked for input, again, this could be your team members, board of directors, community members. Helper can be a media coordinator, to your communications team, an admin assistant. The approver might be the executive director. Again, it might be that department director. It could be the same as the manager. And you could have a lot of other, potential, consulted, helpers, owners, all within this too. This is just a quick example. And so again, keep this in mind when you're developing your work plan. And again, as you're planning and thinking through your work plan and the activities that you want to submit, because applications often ask who will be responsible for each party. Again, this is just a way to kind of be thinking through different roles and responsibilities as you're actually developing the project, as opposed to trying to scramble together after the fact. You've received the funding and maybe a month behind the project already, just because how unfortunately award letters get late and some miscommunication happens. And so I think, again, keeping this in mind when you're developing the application itself is a huge help. And this really helps with poor communication, lack of trust, and delegation. Of course, a big one, because this is delegating and supporting that delegation process. Unclear roles, responsibilities, and deliverables. Again, supporting that, who's role and responsible for who's has roles and responsibilities for each component. Attention to people management. This is exactly that, managing folks. And then an efficient project management tools, which I would say that MOCHA can be a tool for project management. So just a quick poll of the audience. Has anyone used the MOCHA technique to divide responsibility amongst your project team? Yes, no, or no, but it's something similar. So seeing that a lot of folks have not used MOCHA but have used something similar. Few folks have not used MOCHA, and then actually no one has responded that they have utilized MOCHA before. So hopefully, oh, there we have one coming in now. So hopefully this can be a tool that you all utilize moving forward to really help you divide responsibility, understand whose roles and who has what role in who folks need to go to get things approved or signed off on. If you don't need to involve the executive director in a decision, I would recommend not doing that if you can. As you know, more people that you get involved to, that has more risk assigned to it and more potential to delay the project. Okay, go ahead and move on. So essentially what I'm saying, and everything that I've communicated so far, is every deliverable needs a PI, planning, implementation, evaluation, and every PI needs a MOCHA. So if you have a deliverable 1, maybe that deliverable 1 is the finalized work plan, finalized and agreed upon work plan budgets and deadlines with the funder. You're going to go through the planning components of that, scheduling the call, figuring out who all needs to be involved, the logistics of it. That might be more of the helper that, maybe an admin or a coordinator. And you have the implementation of that. Who is the one facilitating that call with the funders? Who is the one then responsible for updating that work plan and sending it on to the funders? And then evaluation. And I think to evaluation is oftentimes, maybe we have a couple of folks just in the organization that really focus more on evaluation. So they might not be a part of the major project team, but just that component, the evaluation component of the team. So be thinking about, not only if you see evaluation, you're like, oh, that's the evaluations team. I don't have to worry about that. But no, who else needs to be involved in that evaluation process from the planning perspective? How soon do you need to get the evaluators involved? Do you need their input in developing questions, or to truly get at what, if you're measuring the right thing, you're supposed to be be accountable to the funder, for example. So really, being really considerate and thoughtful for each one of those steps of the project and who's responsible for what. It really helps to, with that poor communication issue, with lack of trust and delegation, you're delegating stuff right at the front, as opposed to already being behind and trying to scramble and figure out, who should be responsible for this. And then somebody might, I don't know if you all have experienced this, but if somebody already has a lot on their plate and this wasn't communicated at the front, then, it can turn into that situation with that employee. And you want to, it can impact morale. So you just want to make sure that folks know where they're involved so they're not feeling like they're dropping the ball at any point in time. So again, this helps with communication, delegation, roles and responsibilities, a lack of breaking down projects into smaller tasks. This is one that this really supports and can't urge you all enough to consider, again, breaking down each deliverable, each activity into the planning, implementation, evaluation, and assigning focus to each of those. And get that the people management as well. So let's put all of that together really fast. This is just a really quickly developed Gantt chart based off of the previous activity that I had shared. So activity 1, finalize work plan, deadlines, and budget with funder by month 1. I have in the columns here, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. I alluded to this a little bit earlier about how things may overlap and being able to see who has capacity during, which week, or oftentimes these are done in months, with especially our longer projects. But if you figure out when the deadline is, so we can work backwards from that deadline, how much time it'll take to go through the planning process, the implementation process. You're starting the implementation process in week 2, even though you don't have any deadlines until week 4. If you're planning, you're thinking about what needs to be, what needs to go into all of it. And then you also have here who's responsible for the MOCHA on the right. And it's clearly laid out, at least in this, for this example, we have it based off of the MOCHA itself. If you want to have your individual names in there, that works as well. Again, it has all of the information, the deadline, it has the tasks broken up into smaller manageable pieces and who's responsible, all in there together. So another quick question. I'm trying to get folks to share with me here. What are your best practices for dividing responsibility? So again, we heard that I think only 1% shared that they used MOCHA previously. So if you're not using MOCHA, what tools do you all use, or best practices do you all have? You determine that in the application writing process. So that once you're given an application or an award, you already have it all planned out and figured out from the get-go of who's doing what, and everybody's aware because they were all involved in it from the application writing process. So I'm saying that once where do they come together as a team to discuss? So getting all of the folks in the room together, I think that's a great approach. Meeting. Does anybody use Gantt charts kind of similar to what I had just shown, laid out that way to see where folks have capacity, and maybe people might be stretched a little bit too thin because they do have a lot going on in certain maybe weeks or months. Communication, but we are getting Asana soon. Oh, it's great to hear. We'll go, it's a little bit over Asana here. Definitely helps NICU weeks, utilize that. And divide application components by skills and experience, having the most based on experience and having folks that know that work, do those components. Great. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to now focus on accountability to each other and to funders, and also we'll say to stakeholders as well, I think can be included in this. So the biggest challenge I face with internal accountability is, so then this is focused on internal accountability within your organization. Folks being accountable to their team members or their staff. And hopefully some of what I'm going to share will help you all with that. If you're not having a challenge with internal accountability, let me know that too. We have one, grants leads not communicating effectively, so this causes a lot of confusion. That can definitely do that. Or communication being the biggest, or the number one pitfall in project management. Give about one more minute in case folks want to share others. Other work duties that interfere with individuals finishing their tasks or having excuses why they didn't finish, procrastination of other member, or them not understanding how or what to do. So I think that's kind of getting into the risk management of your members and thinking about what risks you might have to manage with the team if you know somebody does procrastinate a lot, or keeping deadlines one set. So those fakes are unrealistic deadlines, yes. And hopefully some of the tips that I provided previously around proper planning, so that you ensure that you're building in time for risks and external stakeholder involvement and where they may or may not provide input as quickly as you would like for them to, so that can support some of that as well. All right, moving on. So internal accountability. Not a lot of new information here I'm going to be sharing, kind of putting it all together. I think the biggest thing is managing expectations from the start. And so folks shared that, once they get awarded the project, they have a team meeting, they all come together, and that's a great approach to take. It's managing folks from the start. Recognizing what the roles and responsibilities are for each deliverable, and going up high for each deliverable of the planning, implementation, evaluation, and within that having a MOCHA for each one, the manager, the owner, consultant, helper, and approver within each of those. And then a clear understanding of success. How do we know that this project is being successful? And a lot of that does come from your performance and evaluation plan, your performance and measurement plan. Have productive project meetings, which I'll get into in a little bit as well. Project management tools and software, of course, more to come there. And then I think one thing that we oftentimes forget to do is celebrate the small successes. I think because we do manage multiple projects at once, folks are going in a ton of different directions. We get caught up in that, but forget to celebrate those small successes. And this can have a great impact on morale on your project team. But if you can just sit and breathe and take in, what all you've accomplished so far. Yeah, you might feel like there's no There's no light at the end of that tunnel, but if you take a step back and see everything that you've accomplished and celebrate those small successes, even if it's, you finally had that work group meeting that took 2 months to plan because it was around the holidays and nobody had time to meet. Celebrate that. You got it done. And these can really help with poor communication, lack of trust and delegation, unclear roles, responsibilities, deliverables, lack of breaking down the project into smaller tasks, again with the pie, needs resource management, having a good understanding of what success means, and having everybody's expectations managed from the start. Risk management, thinking about where challenges could arise, and then of course the lack of or insufficient project management tools. So I mentioned productive meetings. I don't know how many folks feel like this on the line, but I can share with you that I have unfortunately come into a lot of meetings where I'm not even sure what I'm doing there in the start of it. Why am I being invited to this? Why is this on my calendar? Always have a meeting agenda or POP, purpose, outcome, process. For folks that aren't familiar with POP, so now we've added a POP in there. We have PI, MOCHA, and POP. For meeting agendas, always include updates that folks may have, challenges that have arisen, so that you can, assess that risk and manage and mitigate it. And any questions that folks have, you have these as standard items on all of your meetings agendas. Hopefully, that can break down some of the lack of clarity that some folks might feel, or lack of, fear next steps. Also think about MOCHA as you're having productive meetings. Who is the person responsible for scheduling meetings, the logistics of them, finding when people are available, getting a room reserved, a conference room reserved if you need to do so. What about during the meeting? Think about who's facilitating that. Do you have a note taker? Or are you finding that, 3 days later, nobody took notes, somebody mentioned one thing, but you can't quite remember who it is, but now you're having to have to bring everybody back together to try to figure out what that next step was. Think about who's responsible for posting action items and disseminating meeting minutes. So this is on the right here, just a quick example of NACUI's meetings and agenda. Meeting agenda in this template, we have on there the meeting purpose, meeting attendees, who's there, the topic, who's presenting that, so who's facilitating that during the meeting, and then any action items with a due date, as well as the responsible party. That's that MOCHA again, who's responsible for that. And then also on from the bottom too, when the next meeting is. And manage expectations from the start, when, hopefully if there's a due date, everything will be completed before that next meeting. Are there any tasks that are reliant on previous tasks to be completed before that? It's a great way to try to capture all of that during the meeting. Next, external accountability to funders. So similarly, manage expectations from the start. And this really starts with activities in the application. So remember your PI, the planning, implementation, evaluation, a clear understanding of what success looks like, and that's within the performance evaluation measurement plan. And have that first meeting, have clear roles of the funders, clear understanding of roles of the funders. I think especially, on that first project meeting, you might have a project team that could consist of, the team members, the evaluator, maybe 4 or 5 people that are just project team members. And then you might have a technical monitor or project officer, or you might have somebody from the grants compliance department join. So just having a clear understanding of the different roles of folks who you need to reach out to if you have a question about the budget, who do you need to reach out to if you need to make an adjustment on the work plan. And also provide that to the funders as well of what staff's roles are. If you have questions of the organization around the work plan, you need to reach out to this person. If you have a question about this specific deliverable, you can reach out to this person. Again, have a clear understanding of what to do when adjustments or changes need to be made in the work plan, because that's, you don't want to have those virtual or have those conversations via phone that, yes, we're changing this deliverable, this is a change to our timeline, but not have that actually in the grants management, the grant solution, or the for the folks within the agency that are responsible for ensuring that you're meeting the purpose of the grant, which they may or may not know has changed. And ensure the meetings are productive. Again, use the agenda or the top. And then the biggest one is submit deliverables and grant documents on time. I think that is the biggest one to remain accountable to your funders. And that comes with, you know, really planning things out in advance, remembering the planning, implementation, evaluation, figuring out, you know, where those potential risks could pop up, what challenges may occur, what other barriers might happen. You know, if your deliverable is to have a meeting that you're hosting and you've slated it to happen, again, in the summer months where folks are on vacation a lot, or the holiday months, recognize that that might impact your deadline. And again, just a reminder on the bottom right, activity 1, finalize the work plan, deadlines, and budgets with the funder. And then the last activity, ensure ongoing compliance with the funders with, you know, monthly check-in calls, bi-weekly, quarterly check-in calls, whatever it may be, progress reports, annual reports. Include all of those in the application up front too. Finally, external accountability to stakeholders. And I think, again, this is one that we oftentimes forget to think about until we're in the process of trying to corral all of the folks together and get their feedback when they need it, or their involvement when necessary. So consider the external stakeholder involvement during your PI phases as well. And that can be as you're writing the grant application, as well as, you know, as you're starting to work on the grant. Or the project. You need to manage their expectations as well. So, you know, if you have work group members, board members, participants in data collection efforts, you know, what are your measures of success for those? And making sure that you're managing those expectations of them, you know, upfront. Or if they're being asked to join a work group, what is going to be expected of them? You know, will they have to join monthly calls? Will it be 3 to 4 hours of work for them? Will it be, you know, a survey that takes 20 minutes, a survey that takes 3 days, that multiple people need to be involved in? So just manage expectations from the start. Again, ensuring that you have productive meetings, again, having that agenda or the top. And disseminate your work. This is one that I can't stress enough that I think that, again, we oftentimes forget to do, is we forget to disseminate findings, whether it's formally or informally, again, to those your stakeholders, so that they know, you know, what you've been working on the past year. They were involved maybe on all of these calls with you, but and provided a lot of feedback and input, but then they heard nothing from you for 3 months while you were developing the product. Make sure that they see the product and have an opportunity to provide feedback. And just some things for consideration as you're managing the grants, the timeline, the deliverables, and expectations of folks. So another poll question for folks, just to see how many of you all actually use an agenda or a POP for your internal meetings, external meetings with funders, external meetings with stakeholders, maybe never, or never, but I'm going to start now. Open it. I apologize. This should have been a select all that apply. I'm going to reopen it really fast. There folks go. Sorry if you voted and had to change your answer. Now you can select all that apply. So seeing a lot of folks that use agendas or prompts for internal meetings, or less that use them for external meetings with stakeholders, and even less for with funders. % use with internal meetings, great. So for folks then that don't, it looks like folks have agendas or POPs with funders, the least. So maybe that's one tip that you can take back and encourage your team to do while you're having having meetings with your funders. And again, encourage you to include those sections on, updates on the status of your deliverables, any challenges that you've encountered, any questions that you may have for them, as well as next steps. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Now getting into project management tools and resources. We're a big focus stuff now. So just a quick recap, because we've already gone over a number of different resources and tools that I think can be useful in your project management and improving your project management journey. We have planning, implementation, and evaluation, PI. I shared a Gantt chart previously, the way to help with timelines and figuring out deliverables and your personnel management, people management. MOCHA, for assigning roles and responsibilities and ensuring everybody knows who to go to for what, as well as meeting agendas or POPs as a way to ensure that you're remaining accountable to folks and having productive meetings and getting everything out of the meetings that you need to get out of them. I want to get into a little bit about project management software, and just as a reminder, this is the first few slides that McCready doesn't endorse or promote any of these necessarily. This is just to give folks some resources or some examples of things that can be utilized. So this was just technology advice, project management software buying guide. Has a few options like Liquid Planner, Trello, Asana, Jira. And I did provide the website there if folks want to go look at that. You can see that they rated them, and they provided which one has budget tracking, which I know a few folks mentioned that's of interest to them, resource management, email integration, Gantt chart view. And so we'll get into a little bit more there, but just wanted to share that as a website for folks to look at. I did want to spend a little bit more time in Asana, so this I will share with you is the project management tool, primary project management tool, along with all of the others that I've shared that McCready uses. So these are first top pictures, the marketing campaign, and that. So want to make a quick note, even though on this this guide it says that Asana doesn't have the Gantt chart view, it does have that, and so this is kind of what you're looking at, an example of. But you can see here that within Asana you have the assignee who's responsible for a different task. You have all these different tasks to the left, and within those tasks, you can see that there's people with thumbs up, comments were made, and there were actually subtasks within that task, the overall goals and success metrics. It has 5 next to another little icon. That means that there's 5 subtasks within there, and so it's breaking that project into a little bit smaller and manageable bites. And then at the bottom right corner, this is actually just a quick screenshot of McCready's Asana for this project, for one of our deliverables. And you can see how we actually set up our Asana based off of, so this is our IHS, Division of Behavioral Health project, objective 5.1. So we actually have 5.1 planning, implementation, dissemination, evaluation, all built out into our Asana. And so kind of forcing folks to think about everything that needs to happen within each of those phases, so they're not, they're not missing deadlines because they didn't factor in everything that needs to go into the planning of a certain project, or forgetting to disseminate information or evaluate something. And the evaluation is, again, where we're really, the accountability to our funders comes from. Before I move on, does anybody, I know that somebody had shared that they're looking to switch to Asana soon, so I'm not going to get into more deeply into Asana, but wanted to ask if anybody does have any questions about Asana specifically before I do move on. And feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat feature, or just unmute your line. One quick thing that I will share too about Asana is they do have a mobile phone app, so that makes it really easy, especially if you're on travel or in frequent meetings. You can always see, get updates that way. It notifies you when a team member marks off a task, so you're notified that a task is complete. And it's a great way to keep track of all of the different components within a grant or a project. Asana does cost money, I will share though. There is some nonprofit discounts available, so take a look at that. But if you don't have the budget to purchase any software, Excel is a great option as well, and you can make it, you can customize it to what your needs are. And this is just building upon the Gantt chart that I previously shared. Now I've just added a row for status, as well as any notes. And so then this is a way to easily keep track of everything, everything in one place with the deadlines, who's responsible, what the status is, and maybe why that status is there. Here you can see for send to Drupal to identify availability, that got delayed because we're missing contact information. So again, it really helps you with keep track of tasks that rely on one another. There's fancier Excel spreadsheets as well. So there's the endless opportunities within Excel of how you can customize your project management and how you want to keep track of things. You can do this with drop downs that can help you figure out the project status, the responsible team. It helps with reducing data entry error. There's also conditional formatting, so you can a project status being delayed, the box turns red, so you can change the color of them. Task marked complete, you can strike out that box. There's really endless opportunities for what you can do within Excel when it comes to kind of the visualization of the information that you put in there. And I did provide a website it has some Excel templates for project management. If folks want to take a look at that, you can just download them directly to your computer and put your own information in there. Great, a great tool. And this is just a picture of some of the things that you can do within Excel. You can add icons, again, change the colors. Also use this for reporting and keeping track of the progress. So just a quick tutorial, if you will, via screenshots of how to create the drop-down boxes. I think that this is a really great feature that I use for most of my Excel. If I'm going to be inputting the same type of data, the same information into a lot of the same columns, and that can be done with the person that's responsible or the project team, the status of the project potentially, but how you create those drop-down boxes, which again it's for data validation, and so it's reducing error potentially. You just go to data, the data tab up top, then data validation. Once you're in data validation, you can see you can have any value. It can be a whole number, a decimal, a list. It can only be date, time, or it can be custom. So I typically use the list option. You can select, and then from there you'll select the source, and you can either type in the list that you want the options to be with a comma in between, or you can type them out in Excel itself and select that. And there's a lot of tutorials and stuff online if you all have any questions or need some help with that. YouTube is a great source of information. And again, I'll bring up these templates as well that can help some of them have some additional information as well. Another tool that I wanted to share with folks, and I think that this is a good tool once you're kind of already in the project and maybe feeling overwhelmed with maybe the tasks within that project, as well as juggling other projects, other work duties that you may have, using the prioritization matrix is great. So this, I have the link of where I found this one. This is a newer one that I'd seen. I was familiar with, having this quadrant 1, urgent and important, and then quadrant 2, important, not urgent, quadrant 3 being not important but urgent, and quadrant 4 being not important, not urgent. But I do like this one as it kind of shows you a little bit more than your own management. So if it's in that urgent box, manage. So you want to manage that. If it's important but not urgent, that's where it really takes the focus. So preparation, planning, things that take a long time. Not important and urgent, those are things that you often avoid, interruptions, calls, that can be pressing matters that are urgent, that just pop up, that weren't necessarily important 5 minutes ago, but now it might be a crisis. And then that final quadrant 4 are things that you want to completely avoid. That's, you could say, the quadrant of waste. That's busy work, junk mail, time wasters. And so if you're finding that you or your team are having a hard time kind of prioritizing, if you're feeling that you just have way too much on the plate and can't figure out how to break that into manageable pieces, the prioritization matrix is definitely a useful tool for that, and helping staff members to grow and learn how to prioritize their projects as well throughout the week. So it's a good builder for them, capacity builder for them as well to think through. So finally, just some tips for project management tools and what to look out for. The first one, do your research, because there's a lot. I shared just, there are 4 or 5 that I had shared on that buyer's guide, but there are countless others out there. Do your research and really find the one that will work best for you and your team. A lot of them do have free trials, so encourage trying out that trial before you buy. But think about your budget, what features you're wanting. Do you want that email integration? Think about, do you need it to have a phone app, or is only on the computer fine? Is it a web-based product, or is it, if you're just going to use Excel for your project management, that can be free. And also look into the training availability. If there's somebody that can potentially come out to your organization and train your staff on how to use it, if not, to at least have helpful tutorials online that you can watch and use that to get set up. And the third one is invest time in learning the system. I can't stress that one enough. I think, that people are creatures of habits and sometimes reluctant to change. And so if you really want your team to get on board, you really need to give them the time to invest in learning that system, and also setting up the system and training the staff to use it. Because that's just the infrastructure behind all of it. If people don't know how to use the product, then that increases the risk for error and potentially adding another burden to your team's plate if they don't fully know how to utilize it. And not recognizing too that it is a process and it will take time. And so provide the resources that you can. So with that, I'm nearing the end of my presentation. And so have a few more questions for folks, but also if anybody wants to share anything or have questions, share any best practices that you all have, encourage you all to use the chat box, the Q&A box, or unmute line. Hopefully folks have a greater understanding of some of these pitfalls and how to overcome them. They provided some tools and resources and some tips and tricks for consideration that you all can use. Both within the application writing process as well as after you've been awarded that. Moving on to a second question too. And this is just my own evaluation, ensuring that I'm meeting and being accountable to you all with the topics that we said that we were going to cover in this presentation. If you wouldn't mind filling out. Keep that on the screen, but I'm just going to go ahead and move on to show my contact information, but also still encourage folks if you have questions or want to share any of your best practices, encourage you to do so. I did mention that I would let you all go free if there is not a lot of discussion. So it looks like we'll be ending early today, but we do have another community of learning coming up that will get into more of what I think some folks too mentioned that they were interested in learning more about, focus more on the financial components. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Sabu. And if you all stay on the line if folks have questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. This is really great. We have, we'll be sending out the third community session on fiscally managing grants, which will be, you will get a presentation today at the after learning, and please survey that will be asked if you could possibly provide any suggestion how to make this learning better, and how y'all felt about it today. So get capacity in these organizations throughout in the country. Please hold on, and I'm going to close the meeting room, and there will be a survey afterwards to provide to all of you.